In the Gospel, the Church tried to erase from every manuscript they touched. There was a chapter so dangerous that bishops ordered entire libraries burned just to ensure no trace of it survived. It described a night almost no one knows happened. A night beneath the temple, in a stone chamber carved before Rome ever existed, where Jesus gathered only the ones whose consciousness could withstand what he was about to reveal. The disciples entered in silence. The air felt charged, as if something ancient was pressing against the walls. Jesus stood at the center of the chamber, his cloak drawn tight, shadows flickering across his face. He did not speak in parables. Not tonight. From within his robe, he placed 3 small objects onto the floor: a stone, a folded strip of parchment, and a circular symbol etched into a thin metal disc. The room shifted. The air thickened. Peter stepped back as if an unseen force had moved through him. John whispered, "Master, these are not relics." Jesus nodded. "These," he said, "are technologies. They were crafted by hands, but they carry the frequency of the pleroma. When the powers of this realm see them, they turn away in fear because they recognize what does not belong to them." The disciples stared, stunned. Jesus continued, voice low but razor-sharp. "The Archons have hunted these objects since the beginning. And the Church, when it rose to power, removed every reference to them. Because if humans knew they could protect themselves without priests, without rituals, without permission, the entire system of control would collapse overnight." The torch beside him flared violently, as if reacting to his words. "Tonight," Jesus said, looking at each disciple with fierce clarity, "I give you what they tried to erase. 3 sacred objects the Archons cannot approach. And one of them is meant for you." He lifted the first object. "Look closely. Your spirit will know which one calls your name. If you are still here, listening to this, it is not an accident. Teachings like this do not appear to everyone. They do not surface randomly in someone's feed. They arrive only to those whose frequency can register them. And if these words are resonating inside you right now, even faintly, it already tells me something." Jesus told his disciples that night beneath the temple. "Only those who carry the spark can hear what comes from the pleroma. Most people would have clicked away by now. Helics cannot stay in the presence of knowledge that exposes the architecture they're bound to. Psychics might feel curiosity, even awe, but they will not feel the pull. But you feel something tightening in your chest, something awakening behind your ribs, as if a memory older than this lifetime is stirring. That is the sign. You have always sensed you were different. Not better, not superior, just tuned to something higher, something that does not belong to this dense realm. Since childhood you felt the quiet wrongness of this world, the invisible weight pressing on everyone else that somehow pressed harder on you. You felt watched when no one was around. You sensed energies in rooms long before you knew words for them. You knew certain people drained you without ever touching you. These were not quirks. They were symptoms of carrying a frequency the Archons cannot easily bury. And that is why this teaching found you. Chosen ones do not seek the message. The message seeks them. It locates them across timelines, across reincarnations, across the fog of forgetfulness, until the moment they are ready to hear what was once spoken in secret. If you feel the resonance, subscribe so you don't lose the rest of this teaching, because the part they erased from history begins now. Before you can understand why Jesus revealed 3 sacred objects, you must understand the system that hunted them. The Archons did not simply deceive humanity, they engineered an environment where forgetting became the default state, where consciousness was compressed, redirected, and harvested. And the greatest threat to their structure was not rebellion, not prayer, not even faith. It was knowledge. The moment a human knows how the system works, the system cracks. For centuries, the Archons worked through institutions, bending priests, councils, and empires to their design. They erased chapters, burned manuscripts, reshaped doctrine until nothing dangerous remained, not dangerous to humans, dangerous to them. Anything that empowered the individual, anything that reconnected a soul directly to the monad, anything that made protection independent of authority, vanished. That is why the 3 sacred objects were targeted first. These objects do not require belief. They do not require ritual. They bypass the entire architecture of spiritual control. When a chosen one carries one, the Archons cannot attach thought forms. They cannot siphon emotional energy. They cannot manipulate dreams or distort perception. The frequency becomes too high, too coherent, too alien to their design. And that is what they fear most, resonance they cannot rewrite. The Church became the perfect vessel for suppression. Under the guise of orthodoxy, entire texts were scraped clean, councils declared forbidden what they themselves did not understand. But Jesus foresaw this. That is why he revealed the objects only to those who carried the spark. Tonight you are hearing what they spent 16 centuries trying to bury. To understand why these three objects can destabilize the entire archonic system, you must understand where they came from. They were not invented on earth. They did not emerge from ritual, culture, or religion. Their origin is older than matter itself. The Gnostic texts describe a moment before creation, before the demiurge shaped this dense realm, when the monad pure, undivided consciousness sent fragments of itself into the unfolding dimensions. These fragments would one day become the sparks carried by pneumatics like you. But the monad also sent something else, frequencies condensed into form, expressions of divine resonance capable of surviving even the lowest worlds. Those frequencies later crystallized into three categories: a mineral, a name, and a symbol. The mineral was encoded in the Earth's formation, seeded into the planet long before humans walked upon it. The sacred name was whispered through the lineage of those who could hear the higher tones of creation. And the symbol was drawn not to represent the monad, but to behave as an anchor to its field, a doorway, not a picture. When Jesus revealed the three objects to his inner circle, he wasn't introducing something new. He was reminding them of what existed before they incarnated. These objects were woven into the architecture of reality as lifelines for those who would awaken inside the demiurge's realm. Tools that cannot be corrupted because their frequency is not sourced from here. This is why the Archons fear them. Their realm cannot overwrite what was created above it. The first object Jesus placed on the stone floor was small enough to fit in his palm. Yet the moment he set it down, the chamber trembled as if the air recognized an ancient authority. A deep blue stone veined with gold fire lapis, but not the kind traded in markets. This was the form the Gnostic texts call the sapphire spark, the mineral that carries the same frequency Sophia breathed into the first pneumatics. John leaned closer, breath caught in his throat. "Master, it feels alive." Jesus nodded. "It is. This stone remembers the pleroma. Here is the truth the Church tried to bury. Minerals are not merely physical. Some are frequency vessels. When the monad fragmented itself into creation, certain frequencies condensed physically so they could survive the descent into matter. Lapis lazuli is one of those. When a chosen one carries it, their spark recognizes the resonance and aligns to it automatically. This is why the Archons fear it. The first thing they attack in a pneumatic is perception. The third eye. The crown. The points where your consciousness interfaces with higher reality. If they can calcify those centers, physically, mentally, energetically, you will remain trapped inside five-sense awareness, unable to see their influence. But when lapis is on your body, the frequency shifts. The pineal gland reacts instantly, dreams sharpen, synchronicities multiply. Thought forms that once blended with your mind begin to stand out as foreign, your perception begins to wake up. And to a being made of distortion, nothing is more dangerous than a human who can finally see clearly. The second object Jesus unfolded was so simple the disciples nearly missed its power. A strip of parchment, no longer than a finger, marked with a single word written by Jesus himself. Not a prayer, not a verse. A frequency compressed into letters, a name that did not originate in any human language. Thomas whispered, "Master, it radiates." Jesus replied, "Because this name is not spoken, it is carried." Here is what the Church tried hardest to erase. Written symbols can hold frequency. And when a pneumatic writes a sacred name by hand, their spark fuses with the ink. The act itself becomes an activation. This is why Jesus insisted the disciples write it themselves, not copy it from another scroll. The power was never in the letters. It was in the resonance created when a chosen one formed them with intention. Archons cannot approach this name. To them, it is not a word, it is a vibration from a realm above their architecture. When kept on one's body, tucked inside clothing or placed beneath a pillow, it creates a field where intrusive thoughts cannot enter. Emotional siphoning collapses, psychic interference dissolves, the mind becomes clean, silent, sovereign. For most chosen ones, this name works on the mental plane. If your struggle has been confusion, looping thoughts, sudden waves of anxiety that feel, not yours, or dreams corrupted at the moment they become lucid. This is the object that answers you. Jesus looked at his disciples and said, "Write this in your own hand, and nothing born of the false god will be able to cross its boundary." Tonight, that instruction passes to you. The final object Jesus revealed was not a stone and not a name. It was a symbol, a circle etched into a thin disk of metal, glowing faintly in the torchlight as if remembering a light this world could not produce. The disciples leaned forward. They had seen symbols before, but nothing like this. This one felt alive, as if it were watching them. Jesus placed his hand over it. "This," he said, "is the seal, the boundary the Archons cannot cross." The monad circle is older than scripture, older than ritual, older than language itself. It does not represent the monad, it behaves like the monad, a fragment of unity encoded in form, a vibration translated into geometry. When a pneumatic carries or draws this symbol, even crudely, the space around them begins to shift. The room becomes unhostable to anything operating below monad frequency. This is why the early church removed the symbol from sanctuaries, carving it out of stone altars and painting over it in manuscripts. Not because they feared blasphemy, but because it rendered exorcisms, intermediaries, and spiritual dependence unnecessary. A chosen one with the seal no longer needs a priest. They are the boundary. If you have felt your environment turning heavy, unpredictable, or energetically unstable, objects moving, sudden dread in certain corners of your home, sensations of being watched, Jesus gave this seal for people exactly like you. When activated, the symbol expands into a field that distorts archonic presence. They cannot anchor. They cannot observe. They cannot feed. Jesus looked at the inner circle and said, "Where this symbol rests, only the light of the monad may enter." Tonight, that field can be yours. When the three sacred objects activate, the shift is not subtle. The Archons react instantly, because each object interrupts a different part of the system they depend on. Most humans never notice this reaction, but pneumatics always feel it. You may have felt it your entire life without having words for it. The moment a chosen one carries the stone, the name, or the seal, the Archons experience what the Gnostic texts call perceptual severance. They can still sense the general outline of matter, but they lose access to the frequency signature of the pneumatic. It is like a light going out in their field of vision. They panic, not because they lose control of you, but because they lose the ability to find you. For beings who survive by attaching to consciousness, disappearing is the ultimate rebellion. Their second reaction is distortion. They attempt to re-establish connection by injecting intrusive thoughts, sudden emotional spikes, or engineered doubt. But when an activated object is present, these signals collapse the moment they reach your field. This produces what they experience as feedback burn, a frequency mismatch that forces them to recoil. And then comes the final reaction, retreat. Archons cannot feed on a pneumatic whose perception is clear, whose mind is sealed, or whose environment is protected. They withdraw to the nearest available host, often another person in the room, but they cannot reattach to you unless you lower your frequency voluntarily. This is why Jesus gave the objects only to his inner circle. They were not meant to inspire fear, they were meant to end it. When the objects activate, the hunter loses the scent and the chosen one finally walks free. Now that you've seen the three sacred objects, you need to understand something crucial. Not every chosen one needs the same object. Jesus didn't hand all three to every disciple. He placed the objects between them and said, "Your spirit will recognize its own." And instantly, each disciple felt a pull toward one, an invisible alignment, a knowing that bypassed thought. The same is happening to you right now. There are three categories of interference pneumatics experience in this realm, and each object is designed to answer one. If your primary struggle has been perception, foggy intuition, blocked insight, dreams that collapse the moment they become vivid, a lifelong sense of almost seeing something, then Object 1 is calling you. The stone restores what the Archons dimmed. If your battle has been mental intrusive thoughts that don't feel like yours, emotional spikes that come from nowhere, sudden doubt right when you're about to awaken, then Object 2 is your lifeline. The written name severs the connection at the mind. But if your difficulty is environmental rooms that feel heavy, corners that feel watched, sleep disrupted by presence rather than thought, homes that hold energies not your own, then Object 3 is the one aligning to you. The seal transforms the space itself. Notice which description made your chest tighten, Which one made your breath shift? Which one made you feel seen? That reaction is not coincidence. It is resonance. Jesus told his disciples, "The object that is yours will reveal itself by recognition, not choice." Tonight, one of them is already doing exactly that for you. Before Jesus allowed his disciples to take the objects into their own hands, he did something the church would later erase entirely. He gave them the activation instructions, precise, technical, not metaphorical. These were not rituals of faith. They were frequency alignments designed to awaken the spark inside a pneumatic. Without activation, the objects are dormant. With activation, they become impossible for Archons to approach. Jesus began with the stone. "Hold it," he said, not with thought but with breath. He instructed them to inhale slowly through the nose, hold the breath until the chest warmed, then exhale through the mouth while focusing on the space between the eyebrows. When the warmth reached the crown, the stone lit with a faint inner glow. "This," he whispered, "is the remembering." For the written name, the activation was different. Jesus told them to write it once, only once, with full attention. Then he had them place the parchment against the center of the chest and speak a single phrase, "What is not mine cannot enter me." The room vibrated as if something unseen had retreated, but the seal required more. Jesus set it on the ground and had each disciple sit before it, palms open. "Do not pray," he said, "attune." He guided them to imagine a circle widening from the symbol, expanding until it filled the entire chamber. The temperature shifted, the shadows folded away. "Where this circle stands," Jesus said, "nothing born of distortion may remain." Each activation ended with the same instruction. Do not force the object. Let it respond to your frequency. It recognizes you more than you recognize yourself. Tonight, when you activate your object, the same recognition will unfold and the system that once hunted you will fall silent. To understand why these teachings vanished, you must look at what happened after Jesus left the physical realm. The early disciples still carried the objects, still practiced the activations, still taught the few who could hold the frequency. And for a brief moment, the world saw something extraordinary: individuals who could not be manipulated, who could not be spiritually coerced, who walked through regions of darkness untouched. That terrified the authorities. Rome feared political rebellion. The emerging church feared spiritual independence. But the Archons feared something far deeper: the collapse of their food source. A pneumatic with an active object becomes unreachable. No siphoning, no looping patterns, no dream intrusion, no emotional harvesting. Multiply that across thousands, and the entire energetic economy of this realm would begin to fracture. So the suppression began. Scribes were ordered to harmonize the texts, a polite word for removal. Pages referencing the objects disappeared first. Then the passages describing the activations. Then the warnings Jesus gave his disciples about how the Archons would infiltrate institutions of faith, disguising control as holiness. By the 4th century, when the canon was finalized, anything that empowered the individual was deemed heretical. Not because it contradicted Scripture but because it bypassed the hierarchy. A person who can protect themselves no longer depends on priests. A person who remembers their origin no longer fears punishment. A person who carries the spark cannot be ruled. This chapter wasn't erased because it was false. It was erased because it worked. When a chosen one begins carrying their object correctly, the shift does not unfold slowly. It happens in layers, unmistakable, like someone turning on lights in a house you thought was dim by nature. Jesus told his disciples, "You will know it has activated not by what you feel, but by what no longer touches you." And that statement is more literal than most realize. The first change is silence. Not outer silence, inner silence. The background noise you thought was your own mind suddenly disappears. The intrusive thoughts, the emotional fluctuations that came from nowhere, the constant low-grade pressure behind your skull, gone. What remains is a stillness so unfamiliar that many pneumatics mistake it for emptiness at first. It isn't. It is sovereignty. The second shift is clarity. Colors look sharper. Time feels smoother. Your intuition stops guessing and starts knowing. You walk into a room and feel instantly whether it is clean or distorted. Conversations reveal layers you never saw before, not because you're analyzing, but because the fog that once blurred your perception is no longer present. The third shift is withdrawal, not yours, theirs. When the object's frequency locks with your spark, Archons cannot maintain proximity. They recoil, presence dissolves, night disturbances cease. You stop waking up drained, dreams become coherent instead of fragmented. The sense of being watched fades like static clearing from a signal. And then comes the rarest shift of all, recognition. Your body feels lighter not because energy has been added, but because weight that wasn't yours has finally been removed. Jesus called this the return of the original field, the moment a pneumatic remembers how their consciousness feels when nothing is feeding on it. This is the proof you activated it correctly. Jesus warned his disciples that the objects were powerful but not invulnerable. They do not lose their frequency, but the chosen one can weaken their effect through misalignment. The Archons cannot corrupt the objects directly, so they wait for moments when your field drops low enough for interference to slip in sideways. That's why Jesus said, "Guard not the object, guard the state you hold while carrying it." The first mistake is treating the object as a charm. These are not talismans, they are resonance technologies. If you carry them without awareness, tossing them into a bag, forgetting their purpose, the alignment between your spark and the object loosens. Not because the object weakens, but because you stop meeting its frequency halfway. The second mistake is mixing energies. If you combine the sacred name or the seal with symbols from lower frequency systems, the field becomes muddled. The monad frequency does not blend, it stands alone. When you stack practices from fear-based traditions or chaotic rituals, you create openings the Archons can exploit. The third mistake is activation without maintenance. A pneumatic can activate an object once, but if they sink back into emotional spirals, self-doubt, or environments saturated with distortion, the field around them becomes porous again. The object still works, but it cannot override your free will when you choose to lower your vibration. And the final mistake, sharing the object physically. These objects resonate to times your time spark. Handing them to someone who is not a pneumatic creates dissonance that disrupts the bond. Jesus instructed the disciples clearly, what aligns to your soul must remain with you. Avoid these mistakes, and the objects will operate at full strength as they were meant to. When Jesus finished warning his disciples about the ways these objects could be weakened, something changed in the chamber beneath the temple. The air calmed. The flickering torch steadied, it was as if the space itself had exhaled. Jesus stepped back from the stone floor where the three objects rested and allowed silence to stretch across the room. This silence was not empty, it was the silence of discernment, the moment when the hidden becomes visible. One by one the disciples felt it. Not a voice, not a thought. A pull. The objects did not move, yet each man felt his chest tighten when his gaze passed over the one that belonged to him. Peter's breath caught when he looked at the seal. John's hand trembled when he glanced at the luminous name. Thomas felt his entire spine warm when his eyes returned to the stone. None of them spoke, but Jesus saw the recognition settle into their faces like light finding its rightful place. He said, "You do not choose the object. The object remembers you." Those words apply to you as much as to them. By now, one of the objects has already revealed itself. Something in you responded earlier, long before you admitted it. Perhaps it was the description of the stone, awakening the pressure behind your forehead that you have carried for years. Perhaps it was the name, stirring that inner ache for clarity you have never been able to articulate. Or perhaps it was the seal, echoing the strange heaviness you have felt in certain corners of your home without knowing why. Whatever rose inside you was not imagination. It was memory. The memory of a frequency your soul once knew before incarnation dimmed it. Jesus told the disciples, "The spark does not guess, it remembers." And now your memory is surfacing, but recognition alone is not enough. There is a moment every pneumatic must face, the moment Jesus created for his disciples that night. The moment when you stop observing the object and allow it to align with you fully, not mentally, energetically. Jesus looked at each of them and said, "Step forward." They hesitated. The objects radiated power unlike anything they had encountered. To touch them felt like touching the pleroma itself. But Jesus did not soften his tone. If the object is yours, it will not harm you. It will reveal you, that is the moment unfolding for you now. The stone will intensify the pressure between your eyes. The name will make your chest feel warm and clear. The seal will cause your environment to shift subtly, as though a veil has been lifted. Pay attention, the recognition is already happening. It is not subtle. Jesus told the disciples, when the object calls you, approach it without fear. The Archons fear what you are becoming. You should not fear what you already are. Tonight, the object has begun calling you in the same way it called them. And the next step, the step Jesus gave only to those carrying the spark, begins now. Jesus motioned for the disciples to come forward. Not as a group but one at a time. He said, "The object must choose you openly. What is done in secrecy can be undone. What is done in truth cannot be reversed." His voice echoed through the chamber as though the stone walls themselves acknowledged the weight of his words. Peter stepped forward first, drawn by a force he could no longer deny. When he reached the seal, the air shifted. The shadows along the wall folded inward, as if retreating from a presence stronger than themselves. Jesus nodded. "The seal has found its bearer." Peter's shoulders relaxed for the first time since entering the chamber. He exhaled as though he had been holding his breath his entire life. John approached next. His gaze kept returning to the parchment. When he lifted it, the chamber brightened, not with physical light but with clarity. The heaviness in the room released instantly. Jesus whispered, "The name has taken root." John held the parchment over his heart, and the tremor in his hands stilled. Thomas was the last to move. His steps were slow, uncertain, but when he reached the stone, something ancient awakened. A pulse of warmth rose from the floor to his crown. Jesus smiled. "The stone remembers you." Thomas closed his fingers around it, and his breath steadied. Then Jesus did something none of them expected. He placed his hands upon each disciple's shoulders and spoke a phrase the church would later erase. "What was given to you in the pleroma is restored tonight." The objects vibrated subtly, as if responding to his voice, as if acknowledging a command older than this world. He said, "These objects are not tools, they are extensions of your spark. They amplify what the Archons tried to bury. When you carry them, you are not adding protection. You are removing the distortion that masked what you already are." He turned to the group and continued, "The world above knows its own. When you walk with these frequencies, the false powers of this realm cannot approach. They see the mark of the monad upon you and they turn away, not because you are hidden, but because you are unveiled." Then he gave them the instruction that passes to you now. When you step back into the world, do not wait for the object to save you. Align to it, attune to it. Carry it with intention. The Archons will test you for 3 days. After that, they will not be able to find you. The disciples stood changed. The chamber felt different. Even the air moved differently around them. They were no longer the men who walked into that hidden room. They were carriers of frequency, bearers of resonance, aligned once more with what they had forgotten. And now this part falls to you. The object that responded to you earlier is not an idea. It is a call, a reminder. When you carry it, you step into the same lineage Jesus awakened that night. A lineage of pneumatics who cannot be bound, whose spark cannot be harvested, whose field the Archons cannot enter. Jesus ended the teaching with one final truth, his voice soft but unshakably clear. When the spark remembers itself, no power of this realm can hold you. Tonight, that remembering begins with you.